First thing I want to discuss and share information about is the power of one's language, the positive aspect of one's language. There are many people that talk in a negative, self-defeating tone. I see people on a regular basis involved in conversations that I overhear where they're talking about what they could do, what they want to do, instead of talking about what they are going to do, what they will accomplish. Having a positive point of view is much like the optimistic person, the person who sees the best in everything, that sees there's other opportunities available beyond what there is today. Sometimes in a hurry, hustle, bustle world where everybody is so busy all the time, it's hard to be positive on a regular basis. But the best leaders are those who understand the need to be positive because they're setting an example for other people. They realize that they have to set the tone as well as the example. And as a leader, people want to follow a leader, and they also want to be able to hear consistent messages that are of positive nature to them. They also want to know that there's hope, because through the power of language, we can either help other people or we can hurt them. Everybody knows that there's much power in language. Even it could be the type of verbal or nonverbal language, because language can come in many different forms. We want to look at how can we create positive language so that we can communicate more effectively. We want to create that essence of hope, of that vision of a better future, that no matter what, even if there is a problem today, we will solve it. We'll be better off for solving that. Or we will look at it, as I talked about in section 2, as a problem more so as an opportunity to not only alleviate the problem, but make it better so it never returns in the future. Language is very empowering. We can empower one's language by just making some changes and adjustments. When people make a statement about what they will do and who they are, that becomes a statement of authority. It becomes a statement of clarity. It states what people will do. When I say in my vision is that I will train 1 million people from 2010 to 2020, I am putting the empowerment in there and saying I will train. Not that I want to train or I'm going to. I will train 1 million people. There's a difference between I want to and I'm gonna, as compared to I will or I am going to do something. Empowering language, if you listen to the most successful people in the world, whether it be on TV, even in movies, or if you're reading good books, biographies of successful people, you'll learn the language which successful people use. And the language that successful people use is much different than those of people who are far less successful. It's because they have a certain outlook that's different. They have a positive outlook. They have an empowering outlook because they have lived and completed their goals and objectives that they've set for themselves. They're constantly revising those goals and objectives so that they have something to work towards. But because they've seen so many of their goals and objectives completed already, it's very empowering. And so they're very positive. Being positive is a great attribute for leaders to have to set great examples for others. Inviting language. Inviting language, even if it's nonverbal, is a language of inviting people to you. It's a language of allowing other people to join in with you, to communicate with you, or share their concerns, or to get feedback from you. Language of invitation means that people are constantly asking, how can I help you? How can I serve you? Or it's in such a manner that I know you will be successful. You'll do even better with a little bit more studying. I know that you can improve your work if you're willing to do the extra training and education. It's inviting us to also say that you are willing to help them. Ask other people for help, or even ask them if you can help them. Inviting language is one that it's much like asking people to come to your party. Great leaders are those who invite others into their world. Just much like a parent will do with a child, they'll invite them to learn with them and share in whatever's going on, not just tell them what to do. But of all these items that you see listed here, Think about the positive role models that you have as from a parent or a grandparent, maybe an aunt or an uncle who set that positive tone for you, who was empowering, that helped you understand that you could do something that you did not believe yourself would be able to happen. And that invitation of, yes, come and see me, I want to spend time with you. That invitation that allows you perhaps to want to go and seek out others when you need them, and you know when you want to have conversations with them. Self-talk is what I believe the most important part about communication. I believe how we talk to ourselves is more important than how we talk to other people. If you don't have a positive attitude, it's hard to talk to other people with a positive tone. It's hard to be inviting with other people and be empowering when your self-talk is negative. I'll give you an example. On a number of occasions when I might hit my hand against a wooden shelf or a countertop, for example, or if I was to go to the grocery store and when I came home I forgot an item and I needed to go back and get it perhaps, I would say to myself, oh, you dummy, I can't believe you hit your hand, or I can't believe you forgot something at the grocery store. You knew it was important. You know it's 10 miles away to go back to the grocery store. When I talked like that to myself, and I did for a while, I was telling myself I was a dummy because I made a common mistake, or I just had an accident, I hit my hand and maybe scraped my skin, or even something worse. The important point to realize is that how you talk to yourself is often how you project who you are to other people. If you're telling yourself that you're no good, you're never going to be successful, you can't make it no matter what happens, you won't make it no matter what happens. You will struggle. So being able to talk to yourself on a regular basis, and most of us do, whether it happens to be literally out loud or in our head, we're constantly talking to ourselves. And it's usually about painful things, at least in those people who are far less successful than they want to be. They look at why they're not more successful, why they didn't get enough sleep, why they have so much to do. When we start talking to ourselves that way, it just builds up, and it's like the blame game. It's just a topic that just gets bigger and bigger and deeper and thicker. And the idea of self-talk is to be able to say to yourself, you know what? So what? I made a mistake. It's not that big a deal. I'll do better next time. Now I know if I'm going to the grocery store, you know what? I'll make a list of the most important things I need, because I went through that self-reflection piece to realize that I can't remember everything all the time when I go to the grocery store. So my self-assessment says that you need to write a list and do better, and so I write that list as the self-correcting part. So when I go to the grocery store now, I don't forget the most important thing. I may still hit my hand from time to time or do something that I wish didn't happen, but I don't have to tell myself I'm a dummy because I just happened to hit my hand against a countertop. Thoughts are things. Mechanically or electronically, people will tell you they can measure thoughts by looking at different frequencies and levels of frequencies and the power behind them. That being the case, whether you believe that or not, most people will tell you that thoughts are things, meaning that what we go thinking about is what we go about bringing about. In the sense that if you're thinking about positive things, you're thinking about a better future, they become things. And I tend to believe, and as I've read research and I talk with other people, that when you get totally focused, much perhaps like your vision, mission that you create for yourself, that once it's ingrained, or you start to look at your priorities of all the things you have to do, the subconscious mind starts to go to work. It starts to see things perhaps that we didn't see otherwise because of the focus. And so the thoughts that you have, if you consider them to be things, then you can evaluate and say, are you having positive thoughts? Are these good things? Are they not so good things? When I was a child, my father died when I was a very young age. And people were telling me at the funeral, and when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, oh, you're the man of the family. My mother and my sister was 5 years older than me. I was a child, and people were telling me, oh, you're the man of the family. Those thoughts became things because they became things I couldn't handle at that age. They didn't know what to do with them. All they knew that I was the only male in the family, and there was some aspect that I am supposed to be the man of the family. But I can't do anything. I had no power, I had no responsibility. I couldn't make any money. I was 10, 12, 13 years old. What was I supposed to do? So these thoughts became things in my head, and at a very young age, at 13, I had an ulcer because I didn't know how to process it. Where the other things become thoughts that cause things to happen, if you will. So a lot of things could happen which can cause thoughts, which produce themselves in other things. In my case, the thoughts that I had became things which became stress. So think about how your thoughts become tangible items. And I think you can see that if you put tangible aspects to thoughts, these not so intangible items automatically become something of greater value that you can assess differently. Self-talk has to be shifted to provide greater hope, provide the idea and the concept to yourself about a better future. If you're constantly looking at your situation as it's not getting any better, it's not going to get any better, you lose hope. You don't see a better future, so you struggle with why should you do things, why should you work harder, why should you get up, why should you exercise, why should you be a better husband or a better wife or a better sibling. Hope. The world needs more hope, and we have it within ourselves. We just have to self-talk ourselves into it and realize we have a better future. One of the ways I have found to communicate through self-talk better is to surround myself with good music that I like because it's upbeat and it can take my attitude and quickly turn it around into something that's positive. On my iPhone or my iPod, I have a thing called a favorites list. And on that favorites list, I literally have my favorite 25 songs on there. And so when I feel the need, and maybe perhaps I'm feeling a little slow or down or a little self-defeated, I put that music on because those thoughts then change. They become different things, different outlooks that I have. I tend to be more positive, so therefore my self-talk is more positive. I see that now I'm in a better mood. Have better attitude, so my actions change and I get greater levels of success. Plus it also helps me see that there's a better future because some of the songs are really moving me towards my goals. Listening is an important part of communication, and I would challenge most people that they do not listen as well as they talk. Listening is a learned skill. Listening is about being totally present when there's a conversation going on. It's about turning off your phone when you're in a conversation with somebody. It's about when you're at your computer, if you're in a Skype session, or even if you're reading, is to turn off all the extra, like the instant messaging things that happen. Anything else that's going to detract your full attention from a conversation. There's a lot of research out today that suggests people are not focused, that they're not listening because they're so used to that multitasking. Multitasking is helpful and it can be a great attribute for one to have. But when people are multitasking too much, then it becomes problematic because they're not present to the moment. Multitasking is really dividing your attention and your willingness to be able to put time towards one single thing and therefore sharing it. And we know if we share our thoughts and our time with too much and too many different people, we can't do as well as we would do otherwise. Learning skills about listening are not hard to develop. It's really about slowing down. Most people today that I talk to, when I hear about their biggest challenge about time management, issues or concerns, is they tell me they don't have enough time to take care of everything else. Those are the perfect people to slow down because they just need to redefine how they use their time and how they stay with their focus on specific tasks. With listening, it's important to show interest in what people are talking about. Even if it's a boring subject, even if it's something you don't want to really listen to and you don't really care about, if you change your mind and you're thinking about how you are interested in the topic, how important it is to that person, you start to change. It's easy to reprogram our minds if we're willing to. The problem is most people are not willing to, and some people believe that just because they're there, they're showing interest. Just being present is not enough. It's engaging in a dialogue. It's listening with intent, purposefully listening to be able to understand what people are talking about. Think about the last time you were in a conversation with somebody and you were not fully present. How did that make you feel? Perhaps that person may have asked you a question and you had to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention." Or you just didn't want to admit you weren't paying attention and you just kept on going in a conversation, failing to stop to learn more about what you needed to know. Now think about the last time you were in a conversation where you were fully intent and you were listening with great focus and you wanted to help the person. Think about how that made you feel, and probably more so, think about how it made that person feel. Listening is critical, and you can learn to be a better listener just like you can learn to be a better communicator. Being a communicator to a better degree is about listening also. Oftentimes, when you're listening, and you're listening in an intent fashion, it's best to confirm what you're hearing. Or if you're speaking with somebody, make sure they confirm what they're listening to from what you said. What I find when I'm listening to other people, if I confirm, or if you will, paraphrase what they said to me, it helps them to understand that I did engage. It helps them to understand that I know what they're talking about. It helps them to understand that they were able to communicate their message to me in a manner that I was able to relate to. If you want to become a better listener, get focused. Be present. Show interest in what you're listening to, interest in the person who's communicating with you, and then confirm what you heard in a manner which allows another conversation, if you will, to continue on from the point of confirming. Whether it be family or society, to communicate, one must be encouraging. We're in a time in history where there appears to be a lot of gloom and doom, a lot of disparity that's out there, a lot of polarized people, whether it be politically or spiritually. Family and society, the communications that we do there is probably more important than what we do at work. Because we are in our family for life, we are in society for life. We may only be in a career field for a number of years, and definitely only a number of hours each day. So we want to look at our communications and make sure it's encouraging, that no matter what, we're in a positive attitude. Our communications is such that we're literally helping other people, that we're lift them up, not tear them down or hurt them. Even in the toughest of times that we may have, the more positive our approach can be, the easier it's going to be for others to want to either help us or to join in with us so that we can all get over the problem or situation that we're in at that moment. With family and society, it's helpful to be insightful with your communication. That let other people know you can relate to what they're dealing with, whether it be on something that's extremely positive or something that's negative, such as perhaps a hospitalization of a family member, the death of a family member. Being insightful and encouraging allows us to be able to approach people and help them realize that they're not in whatever they're going through alone. Helps us to understand how we can be a better assistance to people, because if we can serve people more through our communications and helping them through encouraging words, then we're literally providing that karma out to the world. We're helping other people, putting that good vibe, if you will, to the world, because they'll come back on us. And as we deal with family and society, I always like to look and say, are we adding value? On your life that you're here in this world, are you adding value? Are you encouraging other people? Are you insightful in looking at situations and making them even better than they are today? Adding value means that if you're not there, you'll be missed. Think about this. An example might be there's a holiday 2 years after your death, and people are sitting around the family table. If your name comes up, what would they say about you? What is the legacy you're leaving behind? Would they say that you're encouraging, that you're insightful, that you added value, that you made a difference during your time on the earth and with them? Or maybe your name wouldn't even come up at all. Or if it did, if it came up in a negative light, yeah, he was always there, but he was always busy doing something else. He was here for dinner, but they'd leave right away. Or while he was there, he really wasn't present. Or she set a great example in one way, but then in the other way, not so much. Adding value to one's life is important. Adding value to other people's life is even more important. I want to share an iMessage here. And this is a great way to learn how to communicate differently in problematic times, particularly of negative conflict. I shared this message at different seminars I've done over the years. This is not something new, not something I created, but it's something that a lot of people don't know about. I did a seminar a couple of years ago in Australia, and one of the gentlemen in the class told me how he and his son are struggling to communicate. He has a son that's a young teenager, and he's in his 30s. And the child is just being a little bit rebellious. Dad really doesn't know how to work well with him. And so I shared this with him, and he told me a few weeks later how his relationship with his son changed dramatically and how it improved just by applying these steps here. So this is really important. I hope that you've got your pens out and you're getting ready to write. If you're not already writing, you'll have this information. You can certainly get it downloaded any time in this program or find it elsewhere. But the idea about avoiding blame and passing judgments in an iMessage, and I'll share the iMessage in a minute, but the importance of the iMessage is that we don't blame people. We don't get involved in the blame game. We don't try and pass judgment on somebody. Like if somebody's late for work, we don't say, what, you can't make it to work on time? What's wrong with you? You can't get up in the morning? Why can't you set a clock like the rest of us? Because you weren't here, we couldn't get a certain amount of things done. That's blaming. That's passing judgment on somebody. And we want to move away from that, because the way we communicate with people, if we can do it in a positive manner, we could reach them and we could be better off for it in the long run. The iMessage lets the other person know that the effect that their behavior is having on you or other people in a non-threatening way. It's non-threatening because you're not blaming people. You're not trying to judge them in that case of somebody being late. You're not trying to blame them for being ill-prepared. You're not passing judgment on them because they can't wake up in time. So the iMessage is important, and it's a way to be able to communicate effectively with anybody. Well, here's an example on how you can apply it. So think about this. This is how it goes. Then you describe the behavior, then you say, I feel, and you describe your feelings or reactions because describe how the effects of the behavior on you or others. So here's an example. We'll go with somebody who's late for work. When you are late for work, I feel like you don't care about the organization's rules and policies, because when you're late, it delays the work that needs to be done. Or when you're late, it means other people have to take more responsibility when doing your work because you're not here on time. You can think about this as a child. When you don't do your homework, I feel like you don't love me because you do not follow the directions that I have set for you. Think about where you can apply this iMessage, whether it be at work or at home, and practice it. Practice it a few times. It gets to be easier. But here, remember, you're describing behavior. You're not looking at blaming somebody because they're late. The behavior is they're late. When you're late for work, when you're 15 minutes late for work, when you don't do your work as required, see, you're talking about behavior. And then the idea is you're telling them how you feel. You're describing your feelings because now you're telling them exactly how it's impacting you. When you're late, I feel like you don't appreciate my position as your supervisor. I feel. This is a statement of saying, this is how I'm reacting to it inside. You're not blaming anybody. You're not trying to say anything more than say, here's your behavior. This is how it impacts me. And this is how it impacts me. Because if you don't show respect for me as a supervisor, it's hard for us as an organization to be successful. Depending on whatever the behavior is on you and the others. This is a great tool. I'd like to go through 100 different exercises with this. When I do this in small groups, I put people together, I have them go through this exercise. If you do this and you do it at home or in the workplace, I'd love to hear from you how it helped change the situation around. But it's up to you to do this in a positive manner where you're inviting to other people. And when you do this, you're communicating with them. You're not pointing your finger at them. You're not demeaning them. You're just telling them how their behavior is influenced upon you and what the result of that is. I wish you great success with this. I've used it a lot and found it to be one of the most informative, most used things I've done, particularly when I was a supervisor in an organization. Moving on to how we can be better communicators in the workplace. This is where the laws of communication comes into this program. Laws of Communication is a book I wrote and published in 2010. It became a bestseller. It came to be because I was looking at different people in organizations and organizational performance as a whole and realizing the differences between the best in class organizations and those who are struggling. And I started to realize that there's some key attributes and indicators of successful businesses and of supervisors who were in those successful businesses and of the employees who reported to those supervisors. And so I call this the laws of communication, the intersection where leadership meets employee performance. This book contains, again, what I call prescription to success. As is my other book, Everyday Leader Heroes, I consider that to be a prescription for success. I do that because I write books which I believe are meaningful and provide content out there that people can not only read and learn from, but they can take it back to work the very next day and start applying it if they want to. There's two laws in the laws of communication, so I'll go through the first one. And the first law is that there is a correlation between how a supervisor communicates with their subordinate on a one-to-one basis and that subordinate's resulting performance. So I'll go through a quick exercise with you and ask you some intuitive questions and give you what I call intuitive view. Think about the worst supervisor you ever had, wherever you worked. Think about that supervisor who was just demeaning, who just didn't care about anything. It was just about getting work done, and they were constantly perhaps looking over your shoulder, telling you what to do whenever you're late, if you took a break too long. You know these people. You've seen them before. But think about that worst supervisor. And in that situation, how did you feel? How did you feel, and how did you perform? Did you feel demeaned? Did you feel good about your work? Did you feel good about yourself? What kind of work did you perform? Was it the best work that you could have done, or was it maybe just enough work to get by? That it wasn't the best and you were just hoping that person would leave or you could find a better job. Think about it now as compared to the best supervisor. If you look at the best supervisor that you ever worked with or worked for, was your performance different than that worst one? Were you still doing just barely enough to get by? Were you looking for another job? Or was work more fun? Was it more exciting? Was it more innovative and creative? Were you able to, take ownership of some of the processes? Big difference between that worst supervisor and how you worked with that one as compared to the best supervisor, right? That sometimes we can't, and we don't end up with one or the other. We end up with some supervisors who are right in the middle. Some of them, they're not the best in the world, but they're not the worst in the world. They're the people who are trying to get better, but sometimes fail because their short-sightedness, maybe they don't have enough education, maybe they got a promotion when they shouldn't have. And so it's kind of like you make some progress, but then it's not a lot of progress. And so it's not a bad place to work, but it's not the worst place to work. But it certainly could be better as well. So thinking about this intuitive view of these three perspectives is how I came to design the laws of communication. I wanted to create laws and display information that suggested these supervisors and how work would be accomplished. In this slide, you'll see what I use as the stoplight metaphor, red, yellow, green, where a stoplight being, as you go in a traffic situation, in an intersection, red means you need to stop. If you don't stop, you could hurt yourself or other people. It's dangerous. Yellow means you should be cautious. If you're going to go through the intersection, you might be able to do so safely, but be careful because somebody may walk into that crosswalk, or somebody may leave the other side too soon and drive into the intersection. You know that you have to get through the intersection if you're in it to be safe. Whereas if you're green, you know you can, in most cases, drive through safely. You may still need to be cautious and look around, don't take anything for granted, but it's safe. It's the best place to be able to be moving if your car is moving. I look at organizations the same way, in the sense that if they're in the red zone, it's danger, it's a problem, and if they don't get out of there, it's fatal. Something's going to happen. They can't keep transitioning in the red zone for long. And if that's the case, what I have found is that the supervisors are very myopic. They're micromanaging and they're constantly changing directions of what they want to do and how they want work done. And because of that, the employees, they do only what's required. There's usually a need for discipline because people are coming to work late. They don't care about what they're doing. They're hoping to find a new job, or their supervisor quits or gets fired. And there's usually some aspect of what we call groupthink, which is the employees band together to try to undermine the authority of their supervisor. This is not going to work well for an organization, and they're going to struggle to be efficient, effective, and profitable in the long run. Because if you don't have satisfied employees, it's hard to produce products and services that are valuable, that people want. Whereas the opposite, in the green, you'll see that there's proactive communications, that there's this interactive, it's open, it's involved, it's energizing, it's visualizing, where people are working together. There's meaningful feedback and feed forward. There's formal feedback. There's informal. There's people that are working together. They're constantly in this positive, encouraging tone. Feedback is very objective, where it's based on performance, if you will, goals that have been set, and whether they're being attained or not. Feedback is timely, whether it means that somebody's getting their annual performance appraisal on a regular basis, or when somebody's doing something good or not so good, that it's pretty much addressed right there at that time, not 2 months later or 3 months later. That there's effective mentoring going on between employees at all levels, and it's this coaching atmosphere where, much like a team, where as a coach helping everybody to get better, not only individually but as a team, that everybody's walking the talk, that the senior level people that are setting the role model, they're not only talking about what needs to be done, they're also doing it, and they're also congruent in their actions, if you will. Then in the yellow, of course, that's a little bit in between, and employees may still be struggling a little bit, but it's better than being where they were before, and it may be because somebody's trying to make it better, and maybe they make some progress, and then that person gets promoted, and somebody else new comes in. Or somebody doesn't have as much skill as a supervisor as one would like. They're doing the best they can what they have, and so they're addressing problems as they arise, but they're never really curing the problem by finding the root cause and clearing it up, if you will. There's a lot of it. Sometimes I would say there are many instances where people are just doing quick reactions. They're not thinking things through. Yes, they are using their experiences to solve an immediate problem, but they're not at that next stage of looking at the opportunity to making sure that the problem never arises again. So as I started to put these areas together, these three zones I call the red zone, the yellow zone, the green zone, that came to be how the book was started. And when I first wrote the book, I looked at this perspective. Again, this is that there's a correlation between how the supervisors perform and how they treat employees as compared to the overall performance of the individual employee. And if somebody is a supervisor to more than one, then perhaps it's how that whole work unit comes together and works. So what I also did at that point is I realized that that's not the only thing that happens in the workplace. I needed another law, I decided, that goes beyond how just the one supervisor communicates with the one or the few employees, to law number 2, that there's a correlation between how the organization as a whole communicates with all employees, one or more employee in a department, and perhaps even other stakeholders of the organization. So the first law was about individual performance of employees that correlates to how they're treated and communicated to by the one supervisor. Now we're going to talk about how an organization performs based on how the whole organization as an entity communicates. I use the same concepts here of red, yellow, green, and as you can see here, we'll walk through the differences. And here we're talking about the organization. If they're in the red zone, where one-way communication is pretty consistent from the top down, from the senior level leaders to the front line. There's never any communication going back up that chain of command, if you will. That's constant guidance. That somebody's always saying, do it this way, this way, this way, step 1, 2, 3. Don't innovate, don't create, just do it this way. And it's very task-based and process-based. About follow step number 1, go here, go there, in an order that's designed, that's somebody believed to be efficient and effective, and it's do it that way or you're fired. And the type of work that we tend to get from employees is that they do exactly what's required. The organization will be by the book, and there'll be no out-of-the-box thinking, no creativity. It'll be, yes, sir, do the work and get it done. In some cases, this is a military organization or a hierarchical organization where people need to do things a certain way, and it's going to get done that way. Whereas in the yellow zone, we start to see that there's a few different things that are better, but still their performance will produce some improvement from the red zone, but it'll be still not ideal. And what we'll find here is that in the yellow zone, that there may be some staff shortages because people still believe they could find work elsewhere, or that they haven't figured out exactly how many people are needed for each job. The departments are in these silos or working individually instead of optimizing resources for the whole organization. That there's some fluctuating policies. These fluctuating policies are as such where one policy is in place, and then 2 months, 3 months later, there's another policy that replaces it, and another one, and another one. And over time, nobody really knows exactly what to do because there's so many different changes that the structure's not quite efficient, and it's not effective in the sense that people's talent is being wasted in some places, whereas they could be used better in other parts of the organization. That the changing of processes is constant, and that there's still this single loop learning of solving the problem but never really correcting it. And these policies, they're still rigid and uniform, but they're at least articulated. And in such a case, the type of performance that we're going to get from the overall company is a poor use of technical and functional expertise, because in some cases, because of the ineffective structure, people who have certain skills and abilities are not in the right place. There's some concerns with customer employee turnover because the employees are not completely feeling wanted and appreciated, because there's inefficiency and waste. Perhaps the customers are not happy because there's a lot of return going on with products that are not working correctly. There's just what I call flavor of the month. The flavor of the month, as I see it, is people who say, oh, well, this week I read a book about how to be a 1-minute manager, so let's just manage everything by 1 minute time zones here. Or somebody reads the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and they start to apply everything they're learning in the book, and then the next month they learn to read another book and they want to try something yet completely different. And this idea of tribalism means that in the different departments, everybody's banding together, and therefore the system is sub-optimized. It's not really optimized where we want to be. Whereas in the green zone, of course, this is where we want to be as an organization with visible leaders, that there's what I call multiple vehicles of communication, meaning that there's communications through maybe these town meetings that senior leaders do, there's department meetings, there's correspondence in newsletters or emails. It's the leaders who are out there on a regular basis talking in open communications, that they are really walking that talk, that the vision and the mission of the organization is fulfilled. They're literally doing the things that they had planned for themselves. There's some aspect of corporate citizenship that really is derived from their guiding principle statement or the values that they have instituted. And there's this aspect of self-improvement that the organization is looking to grow, but realizes it has to grow the people as well. So there's a lot of training going on. There's a lot of education happening as well. The strategic focus is known, and if there is a global impact, it's seamless, and it's not just like, let's do one thing different here in the U.S. and let's do something completely different in another part of the world. That if it's a company and it has worldwide destinations and groups working all around the world, that they're all doing things the same way. I look at this as an example of Delta Airlines. When I go on Delta Airlines, the same approach and same processes happen, whether it's in the United States, in Europe or Asia or any other part of the world. I know pretty much exactly the process is going to be the same. And in such organizations where you have this high-performing group of people, the type of results that you get are these high-performing teams. There's this entrepreneurial spirit of people being able to see problems and correct them themselves. There's a focus on the customers. There's low absenteeism because people enjoy coming to work. They are creative. They have some ownership in their processes. This is a great place to be and work because change is going on, but it's the people that are really seeing the change. They're the ones that are looking at data and making decisions based on the data. It says what's best for an organization, not people guessing at it. That there's this essence of constant quality improvement, and that people trust one another. And so therefore there's trust and respect. There's people communicating effectively. They're innovating. They're creative. I mean, of course, this is the ideal place to be, right? So what I believe is that the laws of communication provide these intuitive views, because here you can probably tell where your organization is just by looking at these words. Most people say that they can, and they immediately, from reading the book or spending enough time with me in a one-day session, they're able to quickly identify where they're at, and then once we do that, then we can move them to the next level. Prescription for Success comes in taking the two tools as, yes, they are intuitive diagnostic tools by themselves by looking at them, but I also realized after the book was published that wasn't enough. I needed something else to be able to go into larger organizations and help them better see how they can communicate differently and become greater at becoming a high-performing organization. As was part of this program, you found a link to a mini 12-question quiz, which is called a Supervisor Communications and Leadership Inventory. The 12-question quiz is part of a larger 62-question survey instrument, which is the Supervisor Communication and Leadership Inventory. What you saw through that link is by answering 12 questions, you were able to find out quickly at a rough gauge where your organization would be on the red, yellow, or green zone. What I'm able to do with research is go into large organizations. For example, one of my clients is the Ministry of Oman, in the country of Oman, where in 2013 they did a survey of every nurse in the entire country and gave them the survey, and we're able to find out to what extent was performance of these nurses influenced by how their supervisors communicated with them. Through the data collection, we're able to find exactly where organizations fall on the red, yellow, or green zone. Here you'll see many different dots. In a survey that was done in one organization, you'll see where all the dots on it, for example, overall for a certain question resulted in. All these dots clustered in different areas, but predominantly, statistically, numerically, in the yellow zone. We're able to see exactly, if you will, from the green zone, how many people believe they were good at what they were doing there, how many believe they were in the red zone, and again, of course, how many were in the yellow zone. Because we have this numbered grid point structure here, when somebody fills out to what extent they believe something, we're able to put the numbers in here and then correlate all the different dots, if you will, statistically, to be able to calculate where they fall out, where each person, as they filled out their entire survey, was able to come out on this grid. We can break this down by individual question or cluster everybody's collective inputs from the whole survey and bring everybody's surveys together and show where they are. So this allows me and my organization to help others realize where they fall on the grid. And then once we find this out, statistically we're able to realize that in the yellow zone, then we're able to look at the open-ended questions that were also with the survey and determine how we could move them and what needed to be done to move them from the yellow zone to the green zone. For all those who have ever used this survey instrument, whether it be the organizations that I've applied it at with my research group, or where others have used it in their doctoral dissertation research, nobody has ever been shown to be in the green zone. Nobody's ever been shown to be in the red zone. Everybody, to one extent or another, has been in the yellow zone, suggesting to me that things are not so bad, but they're not so great either. They're not terrible, but there's room for improvement. And it's understanding when we can figure out where somebody is, then we can decide how to get them to the next level. The organizations that realized where they were in the yellow zone, and through the research, through the numerical part, plus the open-ended questions, we were able to narrow down what we needed to do to move forward. For example, when I went to work with one of my clients, we realized after the data and after analyzing the open-ended comments that what they needed to do was learn how to troubleshoot problems better, how to identify root causes, do team development, leadership training, and basic training about how to communicate with one another. There was too many people yelling and screaming at people when things didn't go well. People were forgotten about how to be polite with one another, and they were being demeaning, although it was not the intention. So the idea being through the communications, we can help people to improve.